shaping the minds of the future. Right? We are the ones shaping the minds of these kids who are going out in the world, but they don't know, they know how to use the phone, but they don't know how to say hello. And that's the problem. Right? So what happened there? In 2002, the Partnership for 21st Century Learning was created. It's an American organization, mostly formed by educators, lawmakers, and business people who understood that there was this need for a reflection on what is happening with 21st century kids and what can we do in terms of shaping an education, shaping a program that could actually teach them how to be better citizens of the world. And they came up with this framework to work. Right? This is the framework for 21st century learning. And here we are talking about not only the academic content, but we are talking about life and career skills, we're talking about learning and innovation skills, we're talking about information, media and technology skills, right? But the ones that stand out, especially for us when we're talking about our English students, are what people call the 4 C's, the learning and innovation skills. Why are they called the 4 C's? Because they are critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. So think about the video that you just saw, right? The jobs that will thrive in the future involve what? Leadership, right? Doing science, analyzing, creativity. These are things that machines cannot teach us. These are things that teachers can teach us. Right? Okay. So this was the first, let's say, this was the first idea that came. This was the first theory that came out of this need for thinking about the 21st century and the 21st century skills. Of course, there are variations to this particular plan, right? A few years later, in 2013, Nick Hockley, she's a digital education specialist, came up with this frame that she called the 4 C's plus. Right? So instead of collaboration, communication, creativity, and critical thinking, she thought of she thought of different ways to focus. So here we're talking about focus on connections, focus on language, focus on design and redesign, and focus on information. But if we take a look carefully, basically we're talking about the same thing as the 4 C's are talking, because focus on connections is collaboration. Right? Focus on language, we're talking about communication. Focus on design or redesign, creativity. And focus on information, critical thinking. Right? So it's more of the same in different words. Right? Yeah? Yeah. Okay. All right. A few years later, Professor Michael Fullan in the University of Toronto came up with the 6 C's. So we had the 4 C's that we already know: creativity, communication, collaboration, critical thinking, plus 2 new. Character, which is the development of the human being, right? And citizenship, a knowledge of the world, a knowledge of relations with different people in different countries and different cultures, right? Okay, but the thing is, regardless of the fact that there are 4 C's, 6 C's, 7 C's, 20 C's, we're basically talking about the same things. We're talking about things that the machines cannot teach us, right? We're talking about relations. We're talking about a very important C, that is common sense. Right? Okay. So now we know what the 4 C's, now we know what the 21st century skills are. Right? The big issue now is how to integrate them in our lessons. We can think about many ways to do that. Right? I've come up with a few ideas, actually a few characteristics. Right? What should a 21st century lesson look like? Or what should it involve? What should it have in the classroom in order to incorporate the 21st century skills? Right? So the first thing that comes to mind is, of course, it has to include technology. Right? But not technology just for the sake of technology. I'm going to give you an iPad and, okay, that's it. That's it? No, we got to think about what to do with it, right? Why are we giving our students access to technology if we are not telling them how to deal with it? And because the implications of that are innumerous, there are so many things that they can do with one very simple device. It doesn't have to be a tablet. You can give them a phone, right? And they can do so many things with it and play games and talk to people, access social media, make calls. Can you imagine that you use a phone to make calls? People don't make calls anymore, do they? They don't talk anymore. The fingers are very fast, right? Okay, but we're not talking anymore. Okay, but the thing is, it should include some sort of technology. Even if you don't have access to a lot, right? Even if it's just a link to a video that you find interesting to play to your students, a little thing. It can go from very small to a lot of it. But you always have to have in mind that it has to have a purpose. It has to have a goal. It's a means to an end. It's not the end itself. Right? The second thing that we can talk about when talking about 21st century skills is the concept of a class should be inviting. The environment should be inviting. Right? Students should not be afraid to come to class and express themselves. When there is a discussion going on, when they're talking about a topic, even if it is something unknown to them, even if it's something not so easy to talk about, and there are many things nowadays that are not easy to talk about, but should be talked about in class, right? Students should not feel afraid to express themselves. There should be this idea that the classroom is a safe space for them, right? But with the idea of inviting also comes the idea of respectful, right? Classrooms should be inviting, but they should also be respectful. In the sense that I am free to express my opinions. But I should know how to express my opinions in order not to offend my classmates, not to offend my teacher, and not to offend the content. And I should learn how to listen, and I should learn how to receive criticism in the same way that my classmates and my teacher should do the same. Right? So the idea of respect is not only the respect that the students should have towards the teacher, it's the idea of respect that students should have among themselves, and also the idea that students should have respect towards the content being taught. You can actually come to class and bring a picture or a video or an article for them to read about something that is not quite easy to talk about, and have them discuss it, right? But within the limits of the classroom, they should be able to express themselves, but they should also learn how to listen to their classmates, right? And they should be able to express themselves in a way that does not hurt other people, right? And this can be taught from a very early age. I saw this research the other day from Professor Herbert Puchta, and he talks about the brain development for kids from a very early age until they are adults. Did you know that at the age of 5, they're very small kids, right? Kids should be able to think before they speak. Before they speak. They should be able to process information before they actually verbalize it. Think about this. How many adults do you know that sometimes... Yeah, exactly. Right? So thinking before speaking is not something that adults should know. It's something that everyone should know. Right? So that kind of thing, it sounds funny when we talk about it, but at the same time, it's something very serious, because it is not just our responsibility as parents, but also our responsibility as teachers. That should also be fostered in the classroom. We should also work with that in the classroom, right? It all comes in this idea of making the classroom inviting, but also respectful, right?
The parents think that we are responsible for all this.
Yeah, unfortunately. Right? Okay, the next thing, the class should be dynamic. Should be dynamic in the sense of, is it okay for them to stand up and walk around and explore the classroom, explore the environment, right? Be able to talk to each other, be able to talk to you, be able to move around, right? It may seem chaotic, it might not be easy to manage at first, right? But as you get used to it, it becomes easier over time. But the idea is that through chaos, because it sounds chaotic, right? It seems chaotic at first. But through chaos, creativity is fostered, right? That's when the creative ideas come out. That's when they are able to explore. They are able to see in depth what they have to deal with, and then they actually process the information in their minds, and they are able to come up. They're able to come up with new ideas, right? That's when creativity happens, right? Okay. The next step is collaborative. It has to be collaborative, right? It's one of the skills. Collaboration is one of the skills. Group projects, right? Group presentations, projects, discussions, everything that is collaborative will help them because it involves all that idea of inviting, right? Of being, students are being invited to participate. But also the idea of they should be respectful towards their classmates and the teacher and the content, right? We're teaching when we work in groups. Not only we are talking about the idea of the skill of working in groups, because we all know that working in groups is not easy, right? But the idea of common sense, because at this point, when working in groups, students have to learn how to negotiate, right? And we're not talking money here, we're negotiating everything. In a group project, we have to see, what are we going to say? How are we going to say it? Who is going to be responsible for which part of the project? When are we going to get together and actually sit down and discuss it, right? And who here has done group projects here? As a student, who has been in group work here? I think probably everyone, right? Do you remember the meetings? Were they productive?
No.
What happened at those meetings?
Too much talk.
Too much talk about?
Like anything.
Anything but the topic at hand.
Yes.
Right. What else?
At home of someone.
Hmm?
Maybe at home of someone.
Okay. Maybe at home of someone in the group.
Sandwich,
Right.
Beer sometimes.
Beer sometimes?
Instead of working and trying to focus, like instead to grab a beer. And
Right. Okay. And in a group project, let's say, for example, in a group of 5 people, out of those 5 people, who actually did the job? Most of the time, 1, 2 tops. In your group, everybody did it. You're lucky.
Except
You are a lucky man.
everybody except you.
Right. We're lucky because I remember. Come on, guys. In my group projects, I was usually the one who did all the job. Not all the job, but most of it. Right? So it was 1 or 2 out of 5. So that happens too. And that, well, ideally it should not happen. So that's when the skills of negotiation come to play. Because they should be able to talk about who is going to do what and what's going to happen if they don't do it. Right? Okay. All right. The next thing, right? When thinking about the content that you're bringing to the students, it should be relevant. As simple as that. What's not relevant is not interesting. What is not interesting will make them sleep. Unfortunately. Right? So, basically, this chart summarizes it. This is what I want to say. This is what I'm interested in. And the middle, what they have in common, is what's relevant. Right? Okay, so when selecting the content that you're bringing to the classroom, think about things that are relevant to them. Right? And the things that are not, but should be, should you work on those things too? And how do we make it relevant to them?
Bring something to their reality.
Bring it to their reality? Okay.
Put it in context.
Put it in context? Right.
Or try to show how it is relevant for the community, for the classroom, for the school.
Mm-hmm.
Try to make it more interesting, more
Mm-hmm.
healing.
Right. Personalize it. Make it personal to them. It may not sound personal to them at first, but if you personalize it, they will understand the connection between their reality and the reality of the content that you're trying to present to them. And then that will make sense to them. It will broaden their horizons as well. Right? Okay. Next is adaptable. Right? When we talk about adaptable content, we're talking about the content that is we are not teaching English just for the sake of English. We are not just teaching the language. We are teaching something else. So when I mention projects are.
Excuse me.
Sorry?
In our mind.
What do you mean in our mind?
We are teaching not only English in our mind, but in the students' minds, it's completely different. It's English, but it's sake of English.
Okay, but then depending on how you present it and depending on the text that you bring them, what you do is you relate the language content with something else, and it becomes not only relevant, but it will and broader the horizons, but it will also make more interesting. So what happens is, let's say, for example, if you are working on a project, that's why I mention project all the time. Projects are good because not only you are teaching English, but let's say you create a project about theater, right? Let's say you have students write a poem. Writing a poem in English is not just about the language itself. It's about inspiration and creativity, right? Poetry in itself, it's something very difficult to read, right? And it's actually something very difficult to write as well. I mean, for me, in my opinion, because I find it very hard to read poetry, but it's a beautiful thing to read because it's actually inspired once you understand it, right? So, writing a poem in English is not just an English class, not just a language class, right? Because the process involving the process that involves writing a poem, it's all about, you talk about the theme, you talk about the words you want to use, your inspiration comes to play. So there are a lot of things involved in writing a simple poem, even if it's just 2 lines, right? So it's not just the language itself. Another way is to talk about science in class, right? Bring little projects like let's plant some flowers and have it in the classroom, right? If you can actually go ahead and talk about technology in the class. Develop a little project. The goggles that I said, the VR goggles. This is something that you can actually build with your students, right? And once you do that, you access YouTube. Did you know that YouTube has VR videos? Did you know that? VR, virtual reality. Yeah. So what you do is that you make these goggles, this virtual reality goggles, out of cardboard, right? And you put inside. What you do is you attach your phone to it, your smartphone to it, and you access YouTube, and you put a video, and you put a VR video, and students can actually see it in virtual reality. It's almost like 3D. It's amazing, right? To access those videos, you can actually just type the video that you want to show and say VR. For example, I want to show my students a video of the city of Rome. So I go on YouTube and I type Rome space VR. You'll find tons of videos. And there are videos of Istanbul, for example, and Paris, and São Paulo, and Tokyo. So you can actually show these places to your students, and the students will have the goggles on them, and they will start going around and exploring the city. And this is an amazing experience for them because they are in the classroom, but they're actually out, right? So we go out of the classroom, we go out of the language, right? We go beyond, and then working with this project. It will make it interesting and relevant for them. Right? And production will be, for them, it would be more interesting for them to produce the language in that way, right? So we're going ahead, we're going out, right? Another thing is we're talking about things that are a classroom that is permeable, right? We see a lot in social media, don't we? People asking for help. Help me! I found this dog, and I need to find a home for him or her, right? I'm starting this project, but I don't have the money for it, so please crowdfund my project. This is a new expression as well, right? Crowdfunding. Crowdfunding means we don't have money for a project, but we're asking people to help us fund the project. So we crowdfund it, right? So please crowdfund my project. Crowd. Crowd is in a group of people, is a crowd. Crowdfund. Yeah, CROWD. Yes, crowdfund.
And there are specific websites just for it.
Yes, yes. There's Kickstarter for one. Kickstarter, I think, is the most famous one. Yeah. Kickstarter. You find tons of great ideas on Kickstarter, and sometimes they're very simple. And people don't need a lot. They're not asking for $3 million. They're talking about, sometimes they need $500, and that's all they need, but they don't have it, right? I imagine it's not that difficult to raise $500, right? Okay, but they're going ahead, but not going back. It's not just about the crowdfunding. It's also about helping the community. So when I talk about going out of the classroom, when I talk about this project to go out of the classroom, not only go out of the classroom in virtual reality, but also go out of the classroom for real, right? Schools now are breaking the walls. They are going out of the classroom. They are going outside of the classroom. They are going outside of the school. They are going in the communities, and they are actually working with the community. They're helping the community. It's not just about working with collaboration. It's not just about critical thinking. It's also about common sense. It's about us who can helping the ones who cannot, right? It gives them a sense of citizenship, and it also and also a great sense of achievement. The fact that they help, the fact that they are able to help each other, and they tell their parents, and they tell their classmates, and they tell everyone else. It's a great sense of achievement, and it's great for them. And seeing different realities that are not their own, make them grow, make them see a broader. They have a broader view of real life, right? Okay. The next thing is it should be self-correcting. Right? Students should be able to correct themselves. Students should have, first of all, students should have the opportunity to correct themselves. Right? And once